Thanks very much. Can I just begin by saying to you that I just want to acknowledge that there are a lot of people out there at the moment that have their knees absolutely worn out praying for me, that I do this all right for you. Now, the last time I was here with Sister Concilio, that I actually spoke at the conference, I remember saying that I wish to have the eloquence to give you the substance of this message. And that's still true today, so I hope that you'll bear with me as we go through this. So let me begin by saying to you that when Father Price asked me to address the conference this year, I have to say to you that when he first put it to me, I was kind of keen to do it. And then the little bits of doubt started to creep in. And I came back to him and I said, Father, I said, did you really get this in prayer? That I should come and speak to the conference. And he said, I did. And he said, I was praying for you the other morning, he said, and what I have to tell you, he said, is speak out of the heart of the committee. And so that's exactly what we're going to do. I'm going to speak to you today from the heart of the committee that formulated all of this 14 years ago. Now, like every good story, it has a beginning. Now, when we came into the Divine Mercy first, I don't suppose really and truly we're much better at it than most of you are, at actually being merciful and taking on all of the kinds of things that we had to do. I'm sure over 14 years, most of you would be familiar now with the popular devotion known as the Divine Mercy. And you know about the image and you will know about the chaplet of Divine Mercy. But what I want to start with today is a little insight into the life of Faustina for the year of the Eucharist. Now, Saint Faustina said that the hallmark of her spirituality was to be a deep, loving relationship with Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. And that was the fullest relationship any person can have this side of heaven. That's what she went for. That and the fact that she just wanted to do God's will. Now, the strange thing about it is when you bring up God's will, you know the way you can get a little bit of kind of slippery slopes about God's will, what is God's will and what isn't. But she was in no doubt whatsoever what God's will was. And I just want to spend a little bit of time kind of teasing this out for you, because it's a question I think that most Christians tend to get a little bit hung up on. Faustina, it wasn't like when Faustina was deciding to do the will of God that she had nothing to go on. She had about a penny's worth of catechism. Remember the old penny catechism? She had about a penny's worth of that. She was born in 1905. And she saw the whole First World War pass on her doorstep. And a lot of the time, school was closed. So the catechism that she got from her parents. And that was the beginning for her of wanting to do God's will. So later on then, when she went into the religious life, you'll find if you dip into her journal here and there, that she begins to study what it means to be a mercy sister, what it means to please God. And as she began to grow in that, she began to experience the visions that you know as the Divine Mercy. But perhaps maybe some of the visions that you don't know that she experienced are that sometimes when she would see Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament, she would seem as a little child. And she got confused about that. She used to say to him, Jesus, will you tell me why you appear to me this way? Why did you come as a child instead of this image here? And he said to her, well, I'll tell you, child. He said, I want to teach you simplicity of heart. I want to teach you how to approach me like a child so that you'll never have any fears or doubts or worries about coming to me. And one of the things she says about her experiences with Jesus this way is that she owed everything in her life to Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. And that he provided a source of light and comfort and strength for her. So, if you're getting all that out of the Blessed Sacrament, it's only natural that you're going to want to become like that. And she desired to be a living host. And that's what we're going to talk about now. You know the way when the priest takes the bread in his hand, first thing he does is he blesses it. Then he breaks it, and then he distributes it. Right? So it's blessed, broken, and distributed. Well, Faustina wanted to become a living image of that. Right? That's exactly what she wanted to be, a living host. And she said to Jesus, Jesus, I want you to make me that. And he said, okay, start thinking about what that actually means. So when you consider the way in which she was blessed, she would turn around and say, I'm blessed from knowing myself. Now, one day in her order, she was very sick, and she got a few oranges sent to her. And it was the season of Lent, she didn't want to eat them. And Jesus appeared to her and said, don't turn any gift down I give you. Don't turn any gift down I send you, whether it be good or bad. Accept everything with humility. And she immediately ate them, and as she finished, she turned around and said, thank you, Jesus. Thank you for helping me know myself. Okay? So that's the beginning of how she becomes blessed. Now, she becomes broken then in humility. One of the things that Faustina would say to you, if she was standing in my place now, humility, humility, humility. And humility is about, I suppose, putting yourself aside for the good of somebody else. That's really what's at the heart of doing the will of God. Loving him in order to do that. And she would get many, many tests, and she'd be badly misunderstood in her order from time to time. And you know what she would turn around and say when I talked about the will of God? She'd say, when I go and I do an act of mercy, when I perform an act of love, she said, I don't worry about what the end consequences that is going to be. Whether it turns out right, whether it turns out wrong. That's not for me to judge. What I do, she said, is I keep the purity of intention that what I wanted to do was for total love of God. And so when she approaches somebody, say one of the wards, or the Magdalena sisters, the Mercy sisters in Poland, they were an order responsible for looking after wayward girls. And so when she would approach one of them, she'd often wait off. And when she would act out of mercy toward them, if she was misunderstood by her own sisters or anyone else, that's the way she would take. She wouldn't allow herself to be insulted. You can't be insulted when you're working for the Lord. Because that's a sort of self-love. So she said, and even if somebody insults me, what I try to do, she said, is I try to see the good in that person. Go beyond the surface thing that you see. Now maybe I'll give you a little example of that. Many of you who know me from the past will know of the addictions that have plagued my family from time to time. I've spoken of them once or twice at retreats. Some of you will know that. And I was walking through town one day, and this guy was sitting there with a cup in his hand. And I saw him, and I was about to pass by, and he turned on me and he said, excuse me, I'm not going to use the language you use, but he just turned on me and said, don't bloody well pass me by like that. Don't give me anything if you don't want to give me anything, but don't pretend you don't see me. And I was riveted to the spot. And I realized I was looking away from this chap. See? I realized in that moment that I'd taken away something of his dignity. I didn't have to give him money. All I have to do was acknowledge him. And then I began to realize another thing in relation to Faustina. That sometimes we don't sometimes part of accepting the will of God is partly suffering. Because you cannot really love someone else and not suffer. Because you have to put something of yourself down in order to address their need. Now, most of us sometimes are broken, and at the point of our weakness is where the love of God pours out. And sometimes we turn away because we don't want to feel that pain, that suffering. My sister, Lord have mercy on her soul, died of AIDS and alcoholism. And I didn't want to see this guy because it was too poignant of a reminder of that. And I realized then that was the acceptance of that was part of accepting the will of God for me, because it impinged so much on my life. And at that moment I turned around and I said, I really am sorry, son. I put a couple of bob in his box, and I said, it's not that. I said, I won't explain it to you now, but I said, I really am sorry, I said, because I know I took your dignity like that. And he was just bowled over. He said, thanks very much. He said, it's just so many people pass by. and they don't want to see. They don't want to know. So it could be lying in the road there, so they just walk over me. And I'd nearly done the same thing, but for the grace of God. Now, I said to you, blessed, because she understood. She got to know herself. That's getting to know yourself. Right? I said to you, broken because of the suffering that's there. And then given out. One of the things that's often said about Faustina is the way in which she was there for the people. That's the last thing our superior said about her. She said, I'll always remember the way in which Faustina was there, in a retiring sort of way. So if Faustina was talking to you now, and talking to you about the will of God, and talking to you about unity with the Blessed Sacrament, first thing she would turn around and she would tell you is that we're all what? What are we? We're all, as Christians, what are we? We're all the family of God. That's what we are. Brothers and sisters to each other. Now, can I just ask you a question? This house is absolutely packed full. How many of you have turned to one another and said, how are you? My name is... Simple little thing, isn't it? Yeah? Okay. Well, now, I'm glad to see that you're doing it now, if you haven't done it already. But you see, Faustina was schooled by Jesus for the mission of mercy that she was going to have. But she had to learn that. It didn't, I mean, people think, sometimes, I used to have this idea of saints because I'd read them out of books, and there were these kind of half-caste women and men that seemed to be, oh God, they were really holy people. And I never thought I'd be a holy person. I still don't think I'll be a holy person, but do you know what I'm trying to say to you? That kind of image that we had. In some kind of way, they were so holy they were up there and you didn't see them. But Faustina wasn't like that at all, and many of the saints weren't. Praise you wasn't like that. They were gentle, humble people. Right? And when they talked about the will of God, they had a single-mindedness about how they went about that. And their single-mindedness was this huge, huge love that Jesus poured out on them. Yeah? And why did he do that? Because he wanted you to see that if he could love Faustina this way, he loves every single one of you in the same way. And yet we have such difficulty accepting that. Oh God, do we resist that? Take an example of what I'm saying to you. The scripture says you're God's work of art. What's the first thing you do when somebody says, God, it's great to know you? Would I be like that at home? Yeah? That's exactly what we do. And that's because somewhere down deep the heart of us, deep in the heart of us, we haven't accepted that we are loved and graced people. And when we begin to accept that, when we begin to let that into our world, it changes the world. Now you heard Father Peter McVerry say, oh, it changed him. I'm trying to tease out for you here how Faustina was changed. Now, I've often looked at Faustina's diary, time and time again, and been amazed at the amount of suffering that's in it, that she seemed to go through, that she records quietly in her journal. But if that's the case, I'm equally amazed at the amount of joy there is. Faustina's joy came from the fact that she was willing to do for somebody else. Now, just think of this for a minute. Imagine the last time that you went out, and it could be something simple like buying a birthday card for somebody that you knew. Right? It might be simply giving somebody the opportunity that they never had. Right? There's lots of hundreds of different little ways in your life when you've created a joy for somebody else, and that joy is rubbed off on you because it's the giving part of that. And that's the transforming part of Faustina's whole spirituality, is that she never wanted to hold anything back for herself. Everything was the love of neighbour and love of Jesus. And that made her an excellent example of community. Communion, community. Community in the liturgical sense, if I can use that big word, that means in the church sense. Another word for church is community. Another word for community is family. And Faustina exercised that community relations in 3 degrees of mercy. The word of mercy, by a verbal explanation, like me to that kid that time, right? An act of mercy doesn't have to be God talk. It doesn't have to be religious talk. Just simply being there for someone when they need it. Sometimes just a good morning and a sunny smile. That's an act of mercy. Right? Because there's something of the goodness that's put forward in it. So the word of mercy. And then she'd look at the prayer of mercy, intercessory prayer. And boy, are we hung up on prayer. Are we ever hung up on prayer? There's verbal prayer. There's meditation. There's silent prayer. There's posture prayer. There's dance prayer. Are we hung up on it? Now, that's not to turn around and say to you that the techniques of prayer are all awash or nothing. I'm not saying that. Some people find contemplative prayer and meditation. Okay? An example of that would be, let's take the verbal prayer that most people are familiar with. Our Father who art in heaven, so on, right? We say it out loud. Okay? Sometimes with that it forms a sort of mantra, and you feel yourself calm and coming into peace, and then into the presence of the Lord. Then there's the Lectio Divina style prayer, where, have you ever seen the cows in the field? Ever seen them? Right. Ever seen the way a cow charges over a bit of grass that's lush and green, and it picks that up and it's chewing on that for hours, and it's chewing all the cud and all the juice it can get out of it. Well, that's meditation in the scripture. It's you're running over that, scanning over that, and you come to that one piece that sort of hops off the page at you till it's all gone. Right? Now, then of course there's the prayer of silence and quiet, where you allow yourself to be still enough to come into the presence of Jesus. But do you know what, folks, I've discovered about prayer? The best prayer of the whole lot is the prayer of the heart. Now, I can't remember. A few years ago, I was down in Cork promoting the Divine Mercy down there. And I heard this story that I could share with you of a friend of mine who went into one of the cathedrals down there to pray. And this lady is into the technique of body language. She sits down, she relaxes, meditates, and so on. And she's going along in that vein and she hears, so she said, she practiced this technique to have, for blocking out kind of thing, by allowing these silences, these moods to go, right? So next thing, so she said, it was all in one, Gerry, I gave up. And I looked to see what was making the noise, and here's this lady, and she's coming up by the Stations of the Cross. And she sees this particular station with Jesus crucified on it, and she looks up and she says, you crater, you poor crater, you died for us, you did. Totally lost. Now, if that's not prayer, I don't know what the hell prayer is. You know what I mean? And then there's the story of the little tearaway coming running in, right? And he's running along that, right? This woman sees him, come here you, come here boy, right? You couldn't have said your prayers that quick, I did, ma'am, he says, I did. So she, what did you say? Well, he said, I looked up at that one there and I said, I'm sorry to beat you up, Jesus. If that's not prayer, what is prayer? Yeah? But at a more sort of gentle level, prayer is simply turning around and wanting to be with God, with Jesus in the sacrament for himself. Faustina had a lovely expression. She said, I like to make myself a Bethany for Jesus. Bethany was the place where Jesus would go to relax with Martha, Mary, and Lazarus. Right? And he loved to relax in the heart of Faustina for that reason. Right? She said, I just want to make it a home where I can sit, listen, look, and love him, and receive that love. When I started this little talk with you, I said to you that I was to speak to you today out of the heart of the committee. Do you remember saying that to you? The Divine Mercy Committee that does this. I mightn't get a chance to say everything I want to say to you today, so we'll be talking again tomorrow, and we'll tell you a little bit more. But that's the kind of schooling that we would have received all those years ago on the committee, working up, to prepare our hearts to even talk about mercy, to walk mercy, to live and breathe mercy. Now, one of the ways that we did that was Eucharist. See, Carl set me thinking that day when he said to me, speak out of the heart of the committee, because I began to thinking, what's the heart of the committee? What really is the heart of the committee? You see, I can be a bit thick getting it. Honest to God, I can. You mightn't think that, but I absolutely can. I can be a bit thick getting it. And then it hit me. All of these years we sat with Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament, trying to listen, trying to study the Scripture, trying to follow the directions of Father Cahill. Now I have to say to you, that doesn't mean we were any saints doing it. Right? But lucky enough, I think Jesus gave Cahill a lot of patience. He certainly gave him a lot of patience with me, that's for sure. But that was the beginning. And I remember, what I'm going to tell you now, I'm going to finish on this, a little story. It'll only take a few minutes more to tell you. And that'll be enough for you today, because I want you to digest that. Because God has a plan for you that I'm going to tell you about tomorrow. It's a sort of rescue plan. But that's going to be for the next talk. But for now, I want to tell you this. When Colin was in his old parish, he said to me, see, we're starting Eucharistic adoration. And I had only come into Divine Mercy, and I think Don Devaney will tell you there. Don introduced me to Colin, and he introduced me into Divine Mercy. And we had many a good rows and argument over things like Medjugorje and things like that, you see. But he brought me up to Cahill anyway, and when we started in Divine Mercy a little bit, Cahill had decided he'd get Eucharistic adoration going 24 hours a day. And of course, I wanted to do me a bit. And I'm thinking, I'll put myself down for an hour now in the morning. And of course, when I come up, that hour would be gone. So eventually, when I got up, there was only 1 hour left, and that was 3 o'clock in the morning. So I thought, well, it's only a commitment of a year. That's all it was for. The whole thing was for a year, and we'd see how it went after that. So I remember the first time that I went. Were you ever prayed out? Did you ever say every prayer in the book? I said Our Fathers and Hail Marys, but my jaw was sore saying them. And my tongue just was nearly swollen. Right? And that went on for about 3 months. And I remember one day we were going out on a retreat, and we got back on the Friday evening, and we'd say you got back about 7. And we'd say that the hour was 3 o'clock in that morning. So I got up and I gone, trying to keep yourself awake. So I was that tired, I said, Jesus, I really can't say any more to you. I said, I just can't pray. I said, enough I'm trying to keep my eyes open. Right? And this beautiful presence touched me. I knew it was Jesus. I knew it was him. Right? Just knew it was him. And I sort of wakened up just a little bit. And when I looked, it was 5 to 4. And I thought, time to go home. So I'm walking down the street, and this word comes into my mind, say the rosary. And I thought, oh Jesus, you have to be joking. You have to be joking. You can't mean that. Now, see, I'd be okay. See, if it was Cahill there, he'd have no problem with it. But anyway, I said, look, Jesus, you're going to have to say it because I can't say it. And out of nowhere, I felt the power, I just can't explain it yet, it just filled me. And I began to pray this rosary. And as I began to pray it, it was as if the words I was seeing seemed to take wings. And and all in front of me was this vision of prisons everywhere. And somewhere in among them, there were men who had fallen eyes and fallen hearts. And as I began to pray that, the prayer went out and it began to touch them. And I realized that this is why Jesus wanted me to say the prayer, because it was touching somebody else. And because I was willing, even though I was knackered, he was doing it for me. And into my mind came, and fallen men will rise again on wings of prayer. This is the kind of prayer Faustina was into. This intercessory prayer. Now I think I'm just about done. But what I do want to say to you is this, I'm not a Faustina, but I think that anybody who turns around and commits themselves to Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament, he will do marvelous things. I noticed that one of the great things that Cathal said to you this morning was, be excited. But I want you to be excited. I want you to be thrilled. Because I know the very first time that I opened that diary and realized that despite all my faults, and believe me when I tell you they are many, I was loved. And I believe that Jesus in those 15 years, and as I look back through my life, never forgot me. Never. And that's what I want to say to you. He'll never forget you either. Now tomorrow, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the stories and the work that we found as we began to realize that really what we were into was a school of love for the most broken-hearted. I'll be telling you a little bit how they got joy and peace. I'll be telling you a little bit more as well about speaking out of the heart of the committee. Thank you very much.